Hey everyone, welcome to the Get Your Life Together Girl podcast, the blueprint to ultimate self-love and inner peace. I'm your host, Danielle Van. As a cognitive behavioral therapist, life coach to women, and author, I've spent my life studying and learning from the stories that make us human. It's my passion and goal to help you shift your mindset and create a lifelong revolution to help you reach your greatest potential. Have you ever asked yourself, why am I here? What is my purpose? Or worse, how did I get here? Not knowing your purpose or how your life has been molded into something that you now can't even recognize as your own directly challenges self-love, inner peace, and our overall life fulfillment. In order to get your life together, you must know what you want as well as where you've been. That's why I sat down with soul-centered mentor Clarie Campagna to talk about the long-term impact of feeling stuck, uncertain in your life's path, and how each of us can start to identify our needs, passion, and ultimate purpose in a few simple steps. The next hour will inspire you to deep dive, listen to what you need and want, and finally take action. The Get Your Life Together Girl podcast starts right now. I am so excited to have you here today, Claire. I'm excited to talk about purpose, igniting our inner fire to really overcome our life and really get into a place where we are moving forward. I know you're an expert, so I'd love for you to really introduce yourself and kind of how did you get to this place where you are teaching others how to find this space within themselves?
Absolutely. So thank you for having me. I am Clarie Campagna, and really, I don't necessarily align with the word coach so much. So I feel like soul guided mentor or like purpose mentor feels really good to me because it's exactly what you said. I'm trying to help people to connect to what's already inside of them. Really what I'm helping people bring out is something that they innately know or will know once they fully connect with themselves. And I'm not really telling them anything that's new, just trying to help them get there because really I think we're all aware of the conditioning and the structures that really our society has built as acceptable. And we all kind of live within that box. And I think a lot of people right now, more so than in recent history, are realizing we're not okay with living in that box.
Right.
And myself included. And that's how I got on this path myself. And I just want to show people that there is another way and you don't have to choose success over happiness or one versus the other. You can have both. You don't have to fit into this box that you think you do and ignore what's really lighting you up inside. So that's the gist of what I do. And the background of how I got there is really my own journey that I experienced with that. And I think a lot of people, again, had this hit in 2020 when the pandemic hit. I felt mine kind of creeping up. I call it my quarter life crisis, kind of creeping up at the end of 2019, even before everything crazy in the world started happening. But obviously, we all know what happened. I won't hash all of that out. At the peak polarity, really, of the world, like in so many ways, everyone's just scared and angry and divided. And I felt like many other people, very isolated and really, really frustrated with my current situation. And took 2 years to get there, but I built my business and what I'm doing now totally based on people who are in a successful, and using my air quotes, life. They've got it all. I had a great job, great marriage. I have supportive friends and family. Why am I still unsatisfied? Why am I still longing for more? And really that's been the start of my journey. And I just want to help other people to find that as well, because it was very frustrating to feel like, okay, I have this perfect life. Why am I still not content?
I think a lot of people go through that. I know I personally went through it myself many years ago, but definitely have gone there myself. And of course, a lot of the women that I work with, when they're coming in and they first think, well, this is the issue, this is the trauma, or this is the thing that's holding me back. And it really gets down to, are we living our purpose?
Yep.
And I think a lot of people are very concerned about what purpose is or how they get there or even what it means. So can we start there? How do we find that inner fire, that inner purpose? And take away sort of that, I don't know, I want to call it like this border that so many people put around purpose, that they think that, oh, it has to be this really big, grand thing. But purpose to each of us is very individual. So can we start with, what is purpose? How do we find it?
For sure. No, I think that's what scares a lot of people. To your point, you think you have to blow your whole life up
Yeah.
to find that purpose. And I think that was my biggest fear. It's like, oh, do I even want to open this can of worms? I spent most of 2020 just being frustrated and not doing anything about it.
Mm.
Being too scared to open the can of worms and see what comes out in search of that purpose. So to me, I mean, through that frustration, it got to a point where the frustration became bigger than the fear of blowing my life up.
Mhm.
And then I realized, oh, I don't even have to blow my life up. Once I started to actually start doing things that just made me happy, there was nothing tied to it. There's nothing necessarily that I'm going to get out of it other than sheer joy. And that's where the purpose is. I mean, the purpose is found in what lights you up. It's an overused phrase right now, but it really is as simple as that at the end of the day. So where I like to start with people and what I think is really helpful to do, I would say maybe twice a year, is to really be clear on top 3, 5 things that you value in life. You can use that Brene Brown. It's online, it's free, and it really is an amazing resource, just her core values list. And it sounds so simple, but I myself and have seen others, it takes a long time sometimes to figure out if you're trimming it down to 3 themes that really matter most to you, it takes a minute to be like, okay, I've never thought about this in this way before. You might think, but until you sit down and really think about it, I think that's a huge first step that shouldn't be skipped over because it's really important in relationships as well. I think that was a huge piece for me too. When I had my husband do the same thing, and I didn't tell him what mine were. 2 of the 3 of ours were the same. And the third one was, they were in tandem. I mean, they weren't the same, but they meshed well together. And I think that was just like, okay, good. I think that's a really important first step that a lot of people miss. They just, to your point, they think it has to be this big thing. I have to save the world. And, that oftentimes is just a different version of being in the wrong corporate job that you hate for 30 years.
Yeah.
You find this thing that you think is going to solve all the problems, but really maybe it wasn't going to Africa and cleaning all the water. Maybe that's not your mission. Maybe your mission is making the best natural candles possible.
Right.
I mean, it's just trying things out and seeing what lights you up and figuring out what drains you. And sometimes it's not what you think. Sometimes you get a really different result than you thought. And there's no other way to find out unless you actually just take those steps and take action to find that clarity and find what gives you purpose.
Yeah. There's so many things that I love about what you just said. The first one is, don't burn everything down. That is something that we all feel like we have to do when we're making big life changes. And the thing is this, if you walk in and set fire to your life, you're creating, or as I like to call it, borrowing trouble in a way that will never support the mission in which you're trying to do, because you're going to clean up everything before you get to that growth space. So please don't burn everything down. I love that you said that. When I'm teaching women about purpose, I will often say to them, what continues to ruminate in your mind in a positive way that keeps coming up with the words like, I wish I could, or I want to? And then I ask them to really align the thinking with the heart space, right? Like, what's happening in your heart? Don't go to all the excuses of why you can't make the natural jump to making the most natural candles, right? Like, what is that space and that place in your mind and your heart that continues to show up for you? That really is the identification of purpose happening. And it's a big thing. It's a big leap. The next part that you talked about is the fear, the big fear. I'm going to talk a little bit about what gets in our way when we're talking about that fear.
Absolutely. I mean, I can definitely speak to the fear because I had it in a huge way. And I think one of the most frustrating things where a lot of that resentment and frustration came from, and for myself and others, is you want the change so badly, but you're holding yourself back with the fear at the same time. And it causes a lot of resentment towards whatever it may be. In my case, it was this life that I had created that I felt like was not my own. I built somebody else's perfect life.
Right.
Based on my expectations and all of that. It's like, okay, I did exactly what I was supposed to, but I'm still not happy. And then I was scared to figure out what made me happy. You get scared that a lot of people, especially when it is in that quarter life crisis phase, if you will, you have that fear of, I've done everything I was supposed to do up to this point, and if I start doing things my way, am I going to lose these relationships? Am I going to burn my life down?
Right.
And I think that can paralyze a lot of people. That is where a lot of people stop and just don't even go to the next step and kind of, for lack of a better word, give up on their purpose, if not forever, temporarily in the moment, because it is terrifying to think, okay, I might be unhappy in my job or in this relationship or whatever it may be, but I don't want to lose all these other amazing parts of my life.
Right.
And it's really, you have to get to a point where, in my case, it took the frustration growing larger than the fear. But I think you also have to get to a point where you trust yourself. Trust that the fear is always going to be there. The fear is protecting you. I mean, that's how your brain is hardwired. We're humans. Our brain doesn't want something that it can't predict. It wants to do what it knows is working already. And that's what you're already doing. Whether you like it or not, it knows what's going to happen and it likes that. And I mean, to me, it was like, okay, I've got to trust. And I started doing really small things, tiny ways to build trust in myself and in my intuition and in my decisions that, I was always a yes man. I was a person that was doing whatever people expected of me, whatever people asked of me, which, got me pretty far in life, but it was pretty far in a direction I didn't want to be in. It was a lot of trust in my case. And I think that's a huge piece of overcoming the fear, because ultimately the fear's not going anywhere.
Right.
So you have to find a way to kind of push through it instead of getting around it. You want to just push through it. And the more you can do that, the less that fear really controls your life.
Yeah, absolutely. The only way through anything, to get to the other side of anything, is through it. We can't go around it. If we bury it, if we stand on top of it, it's always going to return. So we have to move through that fear. I love that you talked about the safety of the brain, because that's 100% true. It's, of course, what I teach every single day. I would love for you to share with us how you began and what exercises you used to build that inner trust in order to get to your purpose.
Absolutely. I mean, it's still ongoing. I should
For
disclaim.
everyone, for everyone. Yes.
Yes. So, I mean, I would say I have tried so many modalities, and really I've found that I go through seasons. Sometimes I am loving journaling and getting my thoughts out on paper, and it's shocking sometimes what your hand writes that your mouth won't say. And that can be a huge, huge help in finding that clarity and really understanding what you even want, especially for a person who has done what people expected of them for their whole lives. It's really interesting to start that way. I would say that was very, very helpful for me. And then once I could see it on paper, I would then, test it out in conversations in safer ways. Like, okay, this isn't that scary of a thing to actually vocalize. I'm going to try this in a really safe relationship and see how it goes, and then kind of expand on it from there. So that was a big piece for me. I'm not so much in a journaling phase right now, though I know I'll probably go back to it. Meditation was huge for me as well. Really helped me to get clear again in a similar way. And I would have those aha moments, those downloads, and then try them out in conversation with people. Or if it wasn't even like something I needed to vocalize, maybe it was asking questions, simply closing your eyes and asking the question, like, I'm so unhappy in my job or this relationship. When do I need to make a move? I don't know when is right and when is the best time. And just sitting with yourself and allowing whatever comes through to come through, and trusting that, going with it and seeing what happens. Because what are you going to lose? If you're unhappy in that place, you might as well trust what you already know and see how
Right.
it pans out. So it was, I would say those were probably the two biggest ways that I, started to try to follow my own instincts, if you will, and actually hear them, quite frankly, because really they've always been there and I've been pushing them to the back or ignoring them. And then there's that other layer too of realizing how connected your body is as well to your thoughts. And I definitely had a phase there where I really got clear, and now I could feel it live when I'm in argument or I'm feeling extremely anxious or whatever strong emotion is coming through. I could feel exactly in my body where I'm getting affected by that. And I think that's a really helpful indicator too. When you are a person who's prone to dissociation or whatever it may be, you can get a lot clearer on what you're actually feeling when you can figure out that body connection.
Living from the soul is really what you're
Yes,
talking about. And
absolutely.
so many people are afraid to get there. They're so afraid that if they get quiet and they ask the questions, that they will be tempted to burn it all down, or they'll be tempted to shift into a place that other people may not align with. And there's this place you're talking about, and I love it. And it's really that, okay, what now space. I am not happy. I am really in a space. I'm not showing up the way that I want to. What now? I'm sure you see that with a lot of the people that you work with as well.
Absolutely. That is a huge theme. The what now, the in between is
Yeah.
really what I call it. And it's a really tough place to be in. I'm not going to lie. It's challenging, but it's a place also where so much growth can happen.
Mhm.
And that's where the trust comes, really. If you allow yourself to have the trust in those moments and the presence and the mindfulness to just be where you are right now, which is really hard because you want to be in the future.
Right.
When you're in that moment, you're like, I wish I just knew what I was going to do so I could just already start on that path. Yeah,
Yeah.
all of 2020, again, that was like, I just let myself ruminate in that frustration. And you can ask anyone in my close family, like my theme of that year was just all I want is clarity. And it wasn't until I started actually taking action and doing things.
Yeah.
I didn't know what direction I was going in, but it was just doing things that I felt like I needed to do or wanted to do that I would have never done previously.
Mhm.
And some of them worked out well, and some of them I was like, okay, that's not for me. But I wouldn't have known unless I took the action. So really the action comes through clarity, as challenging as that can be. But I do think there is also a lot of peace and growth that can be found from just being and sitting in that.
Whenever I hear the trust thing come out of a lot of people's mouth of I can't trust myself or it's scary to do that, I always flip the word to permission. That seems like a less scary thing, right? Like, can you give yourself permission to have a conversation with yourself? Can you give yourself permission to think about what you want? Can you give yourself permission? And that seems like, well, yeah, absolutely. Permission's easy. Trust isn't. They're not too far off, my friends, right?
So true.
Yeah, I would love for you to kind of walk us through for the ladies that are listening that maybe are struggling with that place that you've talked about where I want this, I want to be in the future. I don't even really know what I want. Things are not working out the way that I really want them to be. Can you walk us through where we get started? And let's have that general conversation so what we can maybe open the eyes of someone who's sitting on the other side saying, yeah, I want that, but I have no idea how to start.
And this was my own process. So
Yeah.
I hope that it works for people. It's been working with people that I've worked with, but take what resonates, leave what doesn't, as always. But this worked for me because I was very much there in that place. And again, it starts with that figuring out what you even value. Like that was step one for me in a major way. And I took a long time to really be honest with myself and get clear on that piece. And I think there's a differentiation too between, I see a lot of people do priorities
Yeah.
versus values. Like, for instance, a lot of new moms or something, and where my age range is right now, they'll say my family or my children. And I'm like, I understand where you're coming from, but that's priority in your life. That's not a personal value per se.
Yeah, let's put a pin in that for just a moment because most people do not understand the difference between a value and a priority. So can you move through that very quickly as well?
One of my coaches, Mandy Shakatano, is the one that brought this to my attention. And I just think it's such an important differentiation. It's a priority, again, is something that you might put a lot of emphasis on and importance on. You want to be a good parent. You want to, like, for example, just to use that, you want to be a good parent. You want to be a good mother. But a personal value is, like freedom, for example, might be a value. And to me, a value is something that you want to be able to make all of your important life decisions through the lens of a value. And, a priority is going to get weighed into that equation. But at the end of the day, it is not going to be the decision maker where a value is. So I think that's a big differentiating factor. And it's really one of those things where once you go through this exercise, it will make more sense when you get down to that last 10 word option and you're really trying to figure out which ones mean the most to you. That's where it is, where you want 3 or 5 words, values that you want to make all your important life decisions through that filter. And if it doesn't jive with those things, then it is not for you.
Excellent way to explain that. Thank you. I think that a lot of people really struggle with that and are not sure when we're talking about priorities, goals, values, intentions, all of those things. It's sort of this muddy area. And so if we have a better narrowed definition, I love if you can just get down to 3 things and use that as your lens. That's a game changer for everyone. Huge. Please continue in your process. I'm sorry.
Sure.
I just had to
No,
stop
you're
for just
fine.
a moment. Yeah.
No, that was a huge one for me too. Like, for me, finances was the thing. And it was like, I like the stability and the structure that comes with it. But to me, ultimately, the value was freedom. I like having finances because I like having freedom. So yes, I agree. That's a really important piece that people need to understand. But yeah, so that's step 1, in my opinion, a great place to start. And from there, I think it's really important. And again, this is where a lot of people don't want to do it. They don't want to open the can of worms, but you look at what's in alignment and what's out of alignment in your life today. And you have to be honest. This is just with you. You don't have to tell anyone yet, but this is one of those things where it's understanding, okay, yeah, I'm not happy in my job. I'm not happy in X relationship or Y relationship. And it doesn't mean necessarily that you need to quit or you need to get a divorce. It might mean you need to switch positions at your company. I love the people I work with, but I don't love my job responsibilities. So it's getting really clear on which parts of your life, like to the detailed level, are really jiving and which ones aren't. And that sounds really simple again, just like the values exercise, but most of us aren't sitting down and actually doing this. We think we just know, but when you really sit down and process it at that level, again, it can be really shocking what you learn. And I think those are the 2 most important steps, I would say, to figuring out what your next steps need to be. I've got a couple different paths to take from there, depending on how aligned your current life is with your values versus out of alignment. But really, those are the first steps. And then from there, you really know, okay, what actions do I need to start taking to bring more alignment in? And concurrently, how can I start to figure out why I attracted, because that's ultimately what happened. Why did I attract or allow in these things that aren't jiving with what I actually want? Why did I do this? How did I get here? And really getting to the root of why you brought those into your life in the first place.
And for many people, this part, like you said, is the scariest part because it requires you to look back into your full timeline, right? It makes you look at your childhood and the conditioning and the family expectations. It makes you look at the choices that you made. And a lot of people struggle at this point because of shame, guilt, and blame.
Absolutely. This is This is a very difficult part, I would say. And for some people, this is definitely where I would recommend, if they're not already seeking some sort of outside therapy or something of that nature too. It's like, no, this is part of it. Yeah, this is part of it. And this is not something you need to be doing alone if you do have that wall up and you can't get into your psyche and your subconscious without having someone kind of hold you accountable and hold your hand through the process. But yeah, I loved this process that I worked with I have a holistic therapist. She's a clinical therapist who's also, got a lot of other modalities. And I've folded into what I do as well. She goes through the chakra system.
Yeah.
And the ages that each chakra, kind of is formed early on in your life and how those things, the themes tied to each affects you. Right. How the security in your root chakra up to age 6, what happened during that time to make you feel like you can't leave your job because you have these security ties from so early on in life that you maybe never have looked back at.
Right.
Yeah. So that's a huge, huge theme that scares a lot of people for sure, but it can be by far the most healing and can really launch you to kind of break through a lot of that fear because you understand where it's coming from.
Yeah. I work with a lot of people. In fact, I just did a podcast this week about, and it's not out yet, but about the cycle of attachment that happens. And for anyone that doesn't know what that is, because it's so prevalent into what we're talking about right now, especially in that root chakra, especially in that safety situation is, if you think of a circle, at the top is a need. The next is an arousal, right? An emotional response. The next is gratification. And then the next is trust. And if anything in that cycle is not fulfilled, especially in that 1 to 6 year old, stage of your life, you are going to form some really heavy beliefs and patterns in your brain about how can I create the best safety for myself? How can I best live where I am not constantly trying to fulfill my own needs and have gratification and satisfaction? And so we are often led into places and positions later on in life, relationships, jobs, families, all kinds of things where we are constantly trying to have those needs met that weren't met when we were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And when we begin to explore that, it's mind blowing to a lot of people.
Yep.
It's also very interesting how quick it's like a snap, right? That they go, I don't need that anymore. I did that because, my needs were never met as a child, or I was ignored. My parents were always gone, or, I had this issue and it was such a big deal. It's so amazing to watch how quick. I'm sure you've done some of that work in that attachment cycle too, as you were trying to move out of your fear.
Yes, absolutely. No, you're spot on with all of that. It is so incredible to go through it yourself and also to watch others just experience it almost, I don't want to say with an objective lens, but within a different lens. I mean, you're coming at it. The last time you experienced it was when you were that age. And now you're looking back still as yourself, which is truly the only person who will ever understand it as fully as you possibly can, but from an older and wiser and different lens than you were when you physically experienced it the first time. And that can be so, so healing. And to your point, so quick, the transition when you do actually just open that box and look back and kind of view it from a completely different point of view than you ever have before.
It's freeing. That's that freedom you were talking about. It's so freeing just to say, I don't need this anymore. If this is what's been holding me back, then why am I still there? I'm not that child anymore. And I don't have to base my habits on what your expectation is of me. And that is a huge part of freedom. Where do you find most people get stuck?
It really is different for everyone, but I would say whatever feels, I mean, this is subjective again, but whatever feels most personal to them, that's usually the hardest door to open. And that's kind of a pretty good indicator also of which chakra is probably most affected.
Right.
As well. Is it security related? Is it confidence related? Is it love related. And that really helps you to understand, okay, what exercises, what techniques and what tools do I need to, share with this person to help them to really open up. If it is relationships and love and whatnot, maybe we do a combination of the heart chakra and the solar plexus, give them that confidence and the emotion and the love. Or in my case, it was a lot of root chakra. And it's interesting to kind of realize, okay, which door do we need to open and go down the path the most of? But I would say it really is different, but understanding which they're most resistant to, that's the one they're going to get the most stuck on.
Yeah.
And I think in my age range, which is I'm 29 years old, I would say as a generation, we are very much most affected by following what we were supposed to do. Millennials really came from parents who maybe weren't happy with the way that their parents raised them, and they didn't want to push a bunch of expectations on us, but at the same time they were passively pushing a bunch of expectations on us, and with good intentions in most cases, but it did result in what now is happening. I mean, we're seeing it, the great resignation, and the vast majority of those people are millennials. We all went to college and we all did what we were supposed to do. And now we're in these jobs and questioning our entire lives. So I would say that is a huge theme in what I see of just, again, that struggling to find purpose because it's just been the doing what you were supposed to do your whole life.
Right.
What was taught and what was caught, as my therapist likes to say, which I love.
I love that too. That's a big thing. And for anyone that's listening that says, oh, chakras, I don't know if I believe that. And if you've listened to this podcast, everything that we experience is energy. Everything within your body, everything outside of you, it's all energy. And we catch that energy in our body, which affects how we show up. And we do know, I mean, this is as old as life itself at this point, right? We know that we have energy systems within our body. And if something gets off, everything else is going to be dictated by that offness, right? And so we do have to look at, where did we get trapped? What is the situation that caused this moment that we caught? Now we're using it against ourselves over and over and over again.
Yeah. So I would say that's a huge theme in the work that I do. It's getting past that biggest resistance, really. It's overcoming the blocks. And I have several different ways that we can figure that out based on the person that I'm working with. But it really is a huge part of that, again, is building that trust, building that permission to go there and to know that nothing is going to change unless you allow it to. And trusting that if and when you are ready to open that door and to go within and go inside and figure out all of that pattern that you're talking about that you keep repeating, that's really holding you back. You're the reason that you're not where you want to be right now. No one wants to hear that, but it's the truth.
It's the truth.
And it's figuring out, where that self-sabotage is coming from. A helpful tool that I found that maybe isn't used a ton was hypnotherapy, actually.
Yeah.
You're really having difficulty breaking into that subconscious mind, which again, if you're a person like I was who is prone to dissociating, I think again, that's a big theme in millennials is the numbing. We learned a lot of our family units were the kind that were raised themselves and then raised us in the way where we don't talk about our problems.
Right.
That is not discussed. And I think a lot of millennials are now in a place where we want to talk about them and we want to work through them and we don't know how. I think that's a big part of it. And it's the figuring out how to do it and not being scared of what comes out of it. And hypnotherapy is a really helpful tool for that. If you do have just trouble breaking into the subconscious mind to begin with, it can really help as the first step to get you there. Can't get there yourself.
I will say too, for anyone, that there is actually a guided hypnotherapy session on the podcast. Listen to it. Kate will take you through this beautiful hypnotherapy session that is just absolutely breathtaking. So listen to that. I agree with you. It's a beautiful modality. It's a way to break down the wall in which we're holding ourselves and just get into a place. Listen, out of all of the thoughts that we have coming through our head every single day, almost half of them are subconscious. And actually, it's more than that. And we're being driven by that. And I love that you talk about millennials. I call them the great sensitivity generations. Because really, you're right, raised by parents who were absent, and now they're in a space where let's talk. Let's really talk and figure out, let's change. Let's change the dialogue. Let's change how we're showing up. And I think it adds such beautiful value to our world. I know everybody gets a little bit hot and heavy on the millennials, but you know what?
Yes.
It's beautiful. Let's have a conversation about how we feel. Let's have a conversation about what's driving our decisions and let's change it.
I think to your point, I think a lot of that resistance that other generations have towards millennials, a lot of it, at least in the workplace, which is where I have most of my examples. Why do you think that you don't have to work a 40-hour
Right.
corporate work week and things like, why do you feel so entitled? It's like, you should feel this entitlement as well. You get to choose how you spend your time. I'm trying to, spread the awareness. And I think there's a lot of resentment in there because maybe they, in my experience, feel that their time has passed to do that. And I think that's where a lot of it comes from. But, in my opinion, it's like, let's all do what we can now because we're all so much more aware, no matter who you are and in what way you're more aware. I can guarantee you're more aware now than you probably were in 2020.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, take advantage of that momentum while we've got it and use this like collective consciousness that everybody is raising right now. And let's work together and like just make things better. As idealistic as that sounds, I think it's possible.
No, I know it is. I know it is. I think enough people are doing this work at this point that we're making some big shifts globally. And people are in that space of what works for me. How do I want to feel? Is this how I want to show up every day? Is this how I want to spend my time? And, a lot of it also comes back to conditioning. I'm in my, almost mid 40s at this point, and I know I was raised by very, very successful people. And it was, you will do this and you will do that and you will be successful. And it became this sort of beat that was my drum, right? And then it was like, you know what? I'm going to do what works for me. And I still catch a bunch of shit about that. And I'm okay with it, right? It's like, it's fine. Who cares? I am successful. I don't need your definition. I think that's so important. Can we have, and this is very generalized for anyone listening, because everything that you and I both do is extremely individual.
Yeah.
And there's not a one size fits all tool for every person. Of course, meditation's individual and journaling is individual. There's a process to them. You're talking about getting people out of resistance and a tool that you may guide them through. Maybe someone doesn't have the wherewithal or finances at this point to work with someone who can guide them through. Could you kind of give us a tool that maybe they can use on their own to help them get into a space to start doing this work?
For sure. So I, again, would go back to just being in the present moment, the mindfulness. That was a huge, as small as it sounds, that was a huge shift in my life when I started recognizing when I would have certain emotions. You figure out which emotions are really themes that are coming up for you.
Right.
And when you can, again, feel in the moment, mentally how you're feeling and physically how and where you're feeling it, that was a huge, huge shift for me. And realizing, okay, I'm not the kind of person that needs to stay in the room when I am heated with somebody. I need to step away for even just 30 seconds to feel it, let the emotion pass. I mean, emotions are literally chemical reactions. Like if you're using the science side of it, emotions literally last in your body for 90 seconds. They pass through you in 90 seconds, which is crazy because it's like, no, I don't. I stay mad all day. And it's like, no, that's because you didn't let it move through you.
Yes.
You kept it stuck. And that to me is such a simple step, but can be so, so healing if you actually take it seriously and pay attention enough to allow it to change the way that you act in certain situations and react in certain situations. So that's a big one. And then this might be a little woo, but another thing me too. Another thing that I like to do is I have pre-recorded full moon meditations that I take my clients through. And part of what I do also is I do a full blown like birth chart reading and everything. So I know where their specific placements are and how each moon is going to, impact them. So we try to tie it around a moon theme, the sign theme that's going to really help them break through whatever resistance they're feeling. And it's got some powerful, just like reflection prompts, and it walks you through a little journey there to really help you recognize and ultimately release. I mean, full moons are all about releasing and not bringing forward what is no longer serving you in your life, even if it did at one time.
Right. I love those, especially, well, I love them both. Obviously, meditation and all of that is my jam. It's a big thing for me as a meditation teacher, and I have so many meditations as well. So I love that you're doing that. One thing I would encourage people to understand is that when we talk about emotions, they're impulses. And I
Mhm.
love that you said, you didn't let them move through you. You didn't let the energy of that experience move through you. Everyone needs to understand that our individual definitions of emotions are different, right? We may have this guideline for us that this is love, this is anger, but what does it mean to you? That's a big step in my process with a lot of people is here's a couple different emotional scale charts. I want you to go through and write down what every single emotion is for you. And then I want you to identify 3 to 5 that you're operating from every single day. And it is surprising to most people that they go, I didn't even realize that I swing from happiness to full blown anger every single day. I'm like, yeah, I could have told you that.
Yeah.
However, you need to see it for yourself, right? So I encourage anyone, Google, as I call it, and find the emotional chart and start identifying what emotions mean to you individually and how are you using them? Are you coming from one point to the bottom point every single day? Really, if we can just get you into neutral, you're going to be able to sit in that space and listen and get into that purpose. It's a big
Yeah.
thing.
Talk about draining your energy if you're swinging from both sides of the scale every single day. And I love that. And a point that I didn't fully mention that I also do in that process is when you are experiencing it live, it's also a really helpful way if you're having trouble breaking into, the root causes of what's making you get angry and frustrated and anxious. You might have this like overarching theme that you think it relates back to. But when you're in the moment and you give yourself that 30 seconds away, that space to sit with it and be like, okay, why is this making me so mad though?
Right.
And that can be so helpful because how many times do people actually in the peak of the emotion realize where it's coming from? You let it pass through you, and the moment right after when it's most potent, you're not feeling it at its peak still, but you're feeling the lingering results enough to be like, where did that even just bubble up from? And that is just huge growth can come from that when you realize what is sparking these little reactions that you're experiencing every single day, positive and negative.
Exactly. I always say if there's a moment that is stilling my peace, that moment's not for me.
Love that.
Right? It's not for me. I don't have to engage in it. A lot of times, I'm a mom of 3 and have older teenagers and a younger son. And a lot of times I'll say, you know what? I'm just going to hold my space for just a moment and let me process. And they're like, oh, okay, we're going to back off now. If you can start using that in your life, I promise you, you're going to get to a place where everything that is processing through your mind is going to give you some space and understanding. That is where we can get into that bottom level of what is my purpose? What is
Mhm.
my intention here? That's a big thing. Is just get all of this other stuff out of the way. I always say take your emotions, break them down to just the facts and
Mhm.
move from there.
Yep. You have to understand where you're operating from.
Yeah.
You can't get clear on what you want until you understand who you are. I mean, and it's not the who you think you are or who other people think you are. It's
Mhm.
who you really are right now.
Right.
I think a lot of people too get caught up on, their past or who they once were. And it's, that's all good and well, but that's not who you are right now necessarily.
Right.
And it's kind of, I don't want to say breaking that identity, but it's finding your identity is really what it is. Finding your true identity. And that takes recognizing where you are and why you react the way you do.
Mhm. And I think there's this big push right now, which drives me nuts when you look on any social media, platform where people are saying, well, just act as if. No. I think that the word breaking the identity or that, phrase isn't such a bad one because really we do have to break it down. Who are we? And then acting as if that's fine. You can do that. But are you being authentic in that acting? That's
Yeah, I don't love the word act.
yeah. Yeah. Act as if. No, how about let's just be present?
Yeah. If it aligned and if it's what you are meant to be doing and want to be doing, you're not acting. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Is there anything else that we can do to help us understand, recognize, and get into the motion of our purpose?
to me, the biggest parts are being present and starting to recognize the way that you act, the way that you behave, and where that's coming from. That's like huge, huge number one. And huge number two is understanding what feels good and what doesn't
Mhm.
in your life, which they go hand in hand. Once you start paying attention,
Yeah.
you can't ignore anymore which parts of your life are not really lighting you up and they're kind of draining you, quite frankly. And really, I think those are the two biggest things. And then from there, it's kind of everyone's path is different
Mhm.
depending on what their purpose is and where it's going to take them. But recognizing those two things first. And, some people have more healing to do and more resistance to overcome than others.
I love every year that I sort of do this mission statement for the year. We talk about that in business all the time, but I also do a mission statement for my life where I am at the time of writing the statement, not what was the overarching, because things change, right?
Mhm.
But for right now, if I stepped out of the emotion, I stepped out of the thoughts, and I just said, what is it that I want to create in this year for myself through those core values, through the intentions of why I feel I am here on this earth through this purpose? How am I going to get there? What is my mission? I think that's a big indicator of purpose as well.
I love that. Yeah, I think that's beautiful. A process that I do take my clients through is once we identify those core values and really talk through them and understand what about them for that person specifically really makes them tick and makes them want to have passion and push through and live in that way, we create affirmations for them around each of those. And I even record them if they want, or they can say them spoken word themselves or write them, whatever, drives with them the most. But that seems to be really well received to your point of just repeatedly reminding yourself what you're waking up for every single day is huge. And that's why I recommend, your values are going to potentially shift throughout your life. There's a good chance of that. So it's not using that same list forever. And again, being aware and recognizing when it starts to feel a little stale or like it needs to shift, doing that exercise again and kind of rewriting your story right there.
We are the author of our lives, which I've always said for so long. But the next piece of that was the book is life itself. We are the authors, but the book is life itself. What are you going to write? How are you going to choose your life in a way that sustains you, that is, movement and happiness and grace and joy? And is it always going to be that? No, life is to teach you lessons. Every book has its, negative plot twist. It's okay. It's there to teach.
It's recognizing that you're going to get kicked down at some point, but ultimately it's all part of your journey
Right.
and, learning from all of it. Don't see it as good and bad. See it as a lesson, which is so much easier said than done. But I mean, I think that's a big part of the work that when you do commit to living your purpose and it's remembering that you're in control of where it's going and you can't control your external environment, but you can control how you react to it, to every single situation. And, you get to decide if I'm going to let this anger or shame turn into a temperament or and just be who I am as a person, or if I'm going to let it pass through me, recognize that it came through. Everything's not sunshine and rainbows, but then realize, okay, how can I learn from that? How can I grow from that and move forward to something I want, to be more in what I want?
And I think that the next natural question is, and when you get there, you'll know it. But a lot of people want to know ahead of time so that, and it's going to be individual too. But what does it feel like, or what does it look like to be living a life of individual purpose?
Yeah, it's I definitely wanted to know that. And I think a really helpful thing here is one of the actions that I took when I'm saying I took action to find clarity was I started surrounding myself both on social media, like in the accounts that I follow and the content that I consume, the books I consume, podcasts, and also in person, my friendships. I started hanging out with people who were examples of lives I wanted to be similar to. It's like, okay, you're doing something similar to what I don't know what I want to be doing, but what you're doing, I like and I admire and I respect. And I think that was a huge shift for me when I start spending your time in a way that suits the lifestyle that you want to be living, not necessarily the lifestyle that you're trying to get out of.
That's huge right there. Surround yourself with people that are uplifting, not the people that are depleting. There's a lot of guilt that comes with letting go of people that are no longer
Major.
serving your life. And you
Yeah.
know what? I get it. And even more so if it is the people that we're, quote, supposed to be around, the family member, the, long-term best friend since third grade. These are the people that shake us the most. Well, I can't let go. That's my mother. That's my father. That's my best friend. That's my sister. I cannot let go. And I always say, I understand that. Is it serving your peace? Is it serving your purpose? Is it helping you in your day to day? If you're spending more time cleaning up the messes, probably not serving you.
So true. And it comes back to, again, you don't have to blow it up.
Right.
You don't necessarily have to cut the tie. I mean, in some cases you might, but you can also just shift the way that your relationship is.
Amen.
You
Yeah,
can shift the expectations. And if it doesn't get received well, then I think you got the answer that you needed to kind of give you the confidence to leave it behind or not. If it's not received well, then do you really want that
right.
in your life? But yeah, there's a lot of guilt and a lot of fear for sure that's tied around that piece. But I would say even not cutting people out, but just starting by bringing more people in, filling the space, doing things that you want with people that really are good examples of where you want to be going. And ultimately, you don't even have to do some of the cutting out. It just organically
Really.
happens
Yeah,
in that you're spending your time more doing things that are suiting the lifestyle that you're working towards.
absolutely. And, also too, allowing permission, trust of yourself that says, this is really who I am. And there's another big thing that I'll work with a lot of women in doing is, they're saying this relationship's very tumultuous. I'll say, okay, well, we have to identify what we want and who you are first.
Mhm.
And then if you want to start working on that relationship and cleaning it up and making it work for you, we have to come to the table and have a very honest and frank conversation about who you are, not who they perceive you to be, not who they have known for all of this time and all of this conditioning and all of the ways that you've shown up, but who am I now? That's a big thing. And that is also scary to come to the table, but it can actually serve the relationship. This is who I
Absolutely.
am, and ultimately your purpose.
Are you choosing the long term discomfort over the short term one? Because you got to ask yourself why, if that's what you're doing.
Right. And being uncomfortable is actually kind of exciting. Like if you really think about it, uncomfortableness is actually one of those things that you can go, I'm going to use this. This is kind of where am I going? What is this growth? What is this transition? I kind of like it. Yeah, there's times that it makes me a little fearful or in that bottom level of that, scale of emotions. But there's also this piece that if I give myself permission to own it, man, there's kind of some spiciness to it. And I'm excited about it, right?
Yes. Yeah. Like you tap into definitely a part of yourself that you don't necessarily go to all the time.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. Very huge. I always ask this question and it's something that it's interesting as so many people in our space, offer up because usually they're fairly universal, but I'm going to ask you if there was something that you wished women engaged in or knew, what would it be?
That they already know.
Mm,
I wish that they trusted, gave themselves permission, to trust themselves enough to listen,
mhm.
to listen to themselves and know that they already know what they want to be doing. They already know what they don't want to be doing, what they don't like in their lives today, what they do like in their lives today. And it's having the courage really to live the life they actually want to live. And I think that's there's a lot of fear instilled in women and a lot of obedience instilled in women. And as a whole, it's that inner knowing that we all have and having the confidence to follow it. I wish that everybody would at least just try. And if they ultimately want to go back to whatever life they're living, so be it. But I wish that everybody would just, give it a shot at least.
There's something important to add on to that, I feel. And it is that courage has never began in comfort.
Yes. So true.
Yeah.
Full circle.
Well, so yeah, never has it ever started in a place where you were comfortable, because why would you need courage?
Exactly. You have to be okay with people not understanding where you're coming from, which is so scary.
It is scary. And a lot of people will judge you and they have opinions. And as I have said a million times, and if you've listened to this podcast or you're on Instagram or TikTok, anywhere that I show up, you know that I will always tell you that an opinion is truly what someone else says. This is what I would do if I were in your shoes. We are just really bad about taking them and going, oh my gosh, they're judging me, or this is how I'm supposed to be doing it. And we own it. You guys, it's how they would show up based on their values, their beliefs, their upbringing, their conditioning, and all of the things that they have experienced. You don't have to own it. It's their opinion. I call them the good opinion because we feel that is our good opinion. We don't have to own them. What's your good opinion?
We are souls living in a body. And we need to really give more emphasis and attention to that, in my opinion.
100%. It's mind, body, soul. The soul is where purpose comes from. The soul is that quietness that we're trying to obtain. Be courageous. So I will ask you the question of three, like I always ask everyone. And by the way, someone asked me, why do you always ask three things? And I say, well, it started in practice because I would ask my private clients, what are three things that are fulfilling you right now? So we left on a high note. And what actually naturally occurred was I was receiving comments from mind, body, soul, the three, right? And so I ask you, what are your three things that you're most grateful for? Three things that you wish that everyone would put in practice? Three things that, you are excited about? I don't care. What are your three things?
Yeah. First of all, I love this. My three things, just on the personal level, I am so forever grateful every day for my desire to want to connect with my soul and just helping people to do the same thing. I'm so grateful that I am doing this. So grateful for that every single day. I want everyone to, again, just know that it's within them. No matter how disconnected you feel, it is in there.
Right.
And the more that you can connect with that in yourself, if you're feeling really lonely and really isolated, like a lot of people still are feeling coming off of the last 2 years, the fastest way to get back to feeling that connection is to start it with yourself.
Yes.
And really then you will be, again, shocked at how easily you are able to connect with other people in a way that you haven't before, because you're not connecting with their mind at that point. You're connecting with their soul. So that would be number 2. And number 3 is just, I'll tie it back to the other thing that I think is one of the most important parts of this journey is just, it takes discipline and it takes an everyday effort to be aware and to be mindful and to live in the present moment, which is so overdone, I know, but it really is a huge piece of living in alignment with your soul, is to not live in the past and to not live in the future and to be where your feet are right now. Enjoy and process and learn from each moment.
Beautiful 3. I thank you for taking the time to really teach us how to get into that mind, body, soul connection of purpose and ownership. I thank you so much. What a beautiful conversation. As Claire reminded us, live boldly, through courage and take the steps needed in order to fully thrive in your life. Today, this moment can be day one, so it's time to get started. If you would like to know more about Claire, visit her website at clariecampagna.com. You can also find her on Instagram at claire.campagna. Thank you so much for listening to the Get Your Life Together Girl podcast. If you've enjoyed these tips to bettering your life, please share this episode on social media or directly with a friend. If you're seeking daily inspiration or additional tools and tips, you can follow me on social media at Get Your Life Together Girl on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Or you can visit the blog, show notes, or my website at getyyourlifetogethergirl.com. I also invite you to check out the Get Your Life Together Girl Women's Circle. There's already 100 downloadable tools and practices available to help you get your life together and reach self-love and inner peace. It's updated weekly and available to you right now for only $9 a month. Again, visit getyyourlifetogethergirl.com to find out more. Until next time, be kind to yourself and others.